Welcome back, tributes, to episode 42 of Into the Arena. I'm Holly,
And I'm Emily.
and we have another fun episode for you. But before we dive in, make sure that you are joining us every Monday for Tribute Talk. That includes tomorrow. We do Tribute Talk 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And I'm sure we'll have lots to talk about. Hopefully, a Dr. Gall to talk about, but we shall see.
Yeah, hopefully another Monday announcement like last
Yes.
week, because we thought we weren't really going to have anything to talk about last week, and then all of a sudden, Peter Dinklage.
Yes. So big things can happen all in one day. So that's exciting. But today's episode is going to be unlike any other episode that we've done before, I would say. And I'm really excited for it. This episode, if you haven't read the title, is book recommendations for Hunger Games fans. So with the rise of the Hunger Games trilogy back in the day came a lot of comparisons to past texts, but also kind of sparked a dystopian era of literature, especially YA
Mhm.
literature. We can all remember the rise and fall of YA dystopia. So tonight we're just going to be talking all about books that we recommend slash are similar to the Hunger Games.
Which for me is like so many books because I
Yes.
feel like the Hunger Games, it's just in the vein of books that I really enjoy. So I have
Mhm.
a lot of dystopias that I have read. I'm a dystopia girl.
I mean, if you're watching, you can see behind Emily all the books that we're going to
Oh
be talking
yeah.
about tonight, a little sneak preview.
Plus Twilight.
Yes, we had to include Twilight.
Of course. It's kind of a pet peeve of mine that people recommend books like, "Oh, if you like The Hunger Games, then you'll love this book." And I hate
Mhm.
that because nothing ever has all of the greatness that The Hunger Games has. Like, it has
Yeah.
romance, it's dystopia, there's sci-fi, survival. There's so many different things that make it amazing.
Mhm.
So, I tried to group recommendations into different pieces of The Hunger Games that these books kind of do really well in an area that The Hunger Games excels in, because The Hunger Games excels in so many.
Exactly. It's the perfect trilogy. So our first common theme, survival.
Yes. Some of my favorite books. I don't know, I guess the
Really?
survival element of The Hunger Games is just something that I really love and I really enjoy in other books. So the
Hmm.
first I had on my list was Lord of the Flies, which is
Yes.
one of my favorite classic books. I read it in school and absolutely loved it. And fun fact, it's one of Suzanne Collins' favorite books. She says she rereads it
Hmm.
every few years. So, already like bonus points there. But
Yeah.
it's basically about a group of schoolboys who get marooned on an island and they start kind of having a social order at the beginning, but things descend into chaos, which I love.
Yeah. Yes.
Just very interesting look at like survival, not just food and water, but I think also like mentally surviving and who are you going to ally with and are you going to stay true to like yourself and what you believe is right or are you going to kind of go with the group mentality in order to survive?
Yeah, I had never read Lord of the Flies,
You should.
actually. I know, I need to. I have the
Everything that
book.
you haven't read, I mean, obviously, I'm gonna say, read it. I recommend it.
Yes. But it was interesting for me because I know so many people read the book in school, but my books that I read in school are quite different. Like we'll go through this list and I can bring some of them up. But I never read Lord of the Flies, but I do have a good understanding of what it's about. I feel like you kind of have to if you're a Hunger Games fan. Like you said, Suzanne Collins is a big fan. We all know that. So something I do need to read.
And I believe the author has a kind of pessimistic view of humanity. He was really affected, I guess, like Suzanne, by war
Mm,
and wanted to explore how humanity is inevitably going to descend into chaos. You can read it and like not take it that way, but it makes me wonder how Snow, like if he read this book, what he would think. I feel like he would use it to back up his argument that like we need the capital.
yeah, interesting. From what I know, it just reminds me of a group of kids stranded somewhere, just like an arena vibe.
There's a couple movie adaptations, so,
Mm,
watch those if you want. I prefer the black and white, but, the color one's good too.
sweet. Yeah, now I have to read it and have in mind President Snow. The next pick that we have on here is I'm going to start out with is actually my favorite pick on this list, and I will die for this book. This is right above me is my favorite books that I've read this year so far. And Gracier, the Gracier, is hands down probably one of my favorites from this whole year that I've read. Kind of falls into the survival category. I found it at Barnes and Noble because the tag on it was recommended by a bookseller and it said it's a combination between The Handmaid's Tale and The Hunger Games. That's kind of like what you hear it described as.
Mhm.
And it's essentially about this character, Tyranny, who, when you turn, I believe it's 16, you have to go into the woods and survive for the year. And that's called the Grace Year. Nobody tells you what it's about, what it's for. And when you come back, you're sworn to secrecy with your group, but not all the girls come back. They believe that, like, the young girls have superpowers, which you find out along the way, some uncovered secrets about them.
Mm.
And I love this book because it's essentially just sending, unlike Lord of the Flies, where it's a group of boys, it's a group of young women who are sent out into the middle of nowhere and without any training, they just kind of have to survive, make camp for a year, and not kill each other, like literally kill each other. So I love this book. It shows like a dynamic between humans and survival between like especially one specific gender. It's Lord of the Flies, I guess, now that I'm hearing you talking about
Yeah,
it.
like, I
But
I had heard about this book, and it's been on my TBR for a while, but I didn't realize there was, like, survival elements as
mhm,
much, so that's a really intriguing concept to me for, like, if I read Lord of the Flies and it was about women,
mhm.
like, how would I relate to that differently? And it
Yeah.
sounds fascinating.
Yeah. And then there's different aspects of societal class, just how people interact with each other. Yeah, it's really fascinating. I love that book. It was a really surprising read for me, to be quite honest with you. So if you're going to listen to any book recommendation I have tonight, then please read The Gracier. It's so
That's the
good.
one,
Yeah.
okay. And it came out the most recently in
hmm
2018, right?
And there's no second book. And I've looked for a sequel. I don't know if the author is working on a sequel because it could have a sequel, but also it makes a great standalone. So, I mean, if I was a teacher, I would use it in my class. But
Some things should just stay standalones.
yeah.
Divergent.
Uh,
Yeah.
touchy subject.
Some things, you have one good idea for a book and it should just stay as it is.
Just stop right
Just
there.
wrap it up. Okay, so next on our list in survival, we have The Long Walk, which is a book that I just read in the last year. It's my first Stephen King novel. It's in this ambiguous, I guess, dystopian or like just dictator led country future. There's not a lot of world building in it, which is like kind of the one knock for me, but it's more of a
Mhm.
psychological thriller. So
Okay.
it's like psychological survival, but these boys go on this walk and basically they have to walk a certain speed and they just keep walking until there's only one of them standing and that
Do
person wins whatever they want.
do they decide to go on the walk
They
or are they
decide to
picked?
go. Yes.
Wow, okay, interesting.
So it's just them walking for miles and miles, and it really is character driven. It gets into like their heads and who really has the will to keep going and survive. So I really loved it.
Interesting. Because I've heard you talk about it. I've heard you bring it up before, and I've been meaning to have it on hold at the library. But that's I think this one sounds super exciting to me because I'm really interested by the results of how it would end, slash what you're saying about being in the minds of these young boys.
Also, there's a reality TV component, but you don't really see it as much. You kind of just know that people are watching. So it's kind of like this walk that they've idolized. And it's
Mm,
one thing to kind of sign up for something and think you want to do it, but then when you're in the midst of it, not as great as you thought it might be.
interesting. Like the careers.
Yeah.
Sweet.
So,
That sounds
yeah, I
so
loved
interesting.
it. The last one that I have for survival is The Road by Cormac McCarthy. I read this one for like a free choice read in high school. I feel like I lucked out because I
Mhm.
took, instead of AP English classes, which I totally could have taken, all my friends were doing that, but we had the choice to do like sci-fi fantasy English instead of
What?
AP, or dark
Oh,
romantic gothic lit I took instead of AP. And I was like, yeah, I
whoa.
want to take these classes. I don't want to do AP, and I think it served me well. So,
That's so cool. Yeah, that's very cool.
but I read The Road, and it's a post-apocalyptic story, and it's very simplistic. The writing is very simplistic. It kind of reminds me of the Hunger Games a little bit in that way. I think it kind of reflects like how desolate and stripped society is, and that the writing is very barren, so you kind of like feel that. But it's post-apocalyptic, and it's just about a father and a son, and they are trying to make their way across the country to safety, but they face a lot of dangers along the
Hmm.
way. And that's pretty much it. But
And you
it's
got to
really
read
good.
that for school. Okay.
And it's an excellent movie as well. So if you don't want to read the book, the movie is fantastic. Those are our survival
Yeah,
recommendations.
romance and drama.
We both love the romance in
Yes,
the Hunger
of
Games.
course.
Like, come on.
Who doesn't? It's PETA and Katniss. But both of these picks we've both read, and you will know that we've both read one of them. The first one is The Selection by Kira Cass. I would be surprised if you haven't heard of this book. It's very popular. It's a series, and people describe it as The Hunger Games meets The Bachelor,
Which it
essentially.
is. It's a very
Yeah,
good description, I think.
exactly. And it's a dystopian world where there's a caste-like system of power, and a group of mostly impoverished young girls within these castes are picked the bachelor, pretty much. They go and they're out seeking the heart of the prince of the land. But along the way, it's a little bit darker and things become more interesting. It's no longer just cute and fun bachelor. It gets to be more a discussion of class and government. And yeah, it's very similar in that sense to the Hunger Games. So obviously, it is more romance based, but I mean, I remember reading these books back when I was younger. I probably read them in middle school,
I
and
was
I
so
love
much older.
them. I
But I
love
still
them.
love them. I
Yes.
remember I read them, I like sped through them during
Yes.
Christmas break
Hmm.
over a 2-week period one Christmas. And
Yeah.
I was in a reading slump, and it like really got me out of that.
I also know it's going to be a series on some streaming service, I think
Netflix,
Netflix.
I believe,
Yeah, so get on it. It's a great
with
read. I
maybe
mean,
Sadie Sink
which would be
as
Dream
America.
America. Please.
Um, Sign me up.
Yeah.
I was already signed up, but VIP, please.
Hmm. So yes, check out The Selection. It's a great series. And I believe Kira Cass actually has a new book coming out this next year. So exciting.
Cool.
And then our next book or series I threw on here because I couldn't not throw it on here because everyone compares it is Twilight. Twilight started the pyramid, like love triangle trope. So we have our two love triangles, Katniss Peta Gale, Bella Edward Jacob. And I mean, if you haven't read them, I feel like you're not going to at this point, to be honest. But if we
You
can get
never
one more
know.
person to read, go read them. It's obviously not dystopian, it's definitely more fantasy, romance. I mean, that's where we got our love triangle from, so we had to do an honorable
I
mention.
mean, I feel like Katniss and Peeta are really cute, and Bella and Edward are really cute. So
There we go.
I would say if you like Katniss and Peeta's banter that they sometimes get into, like you'll like Edward and Bella's banter, which is in the books, not in the movies. So
Mhm.
don't
Or
knock
in
it
the
till you
books.
try it.
Exactly. Don't judge the movies if you haven't read the books, at least the first book. That's our romance slash drama section.
So our next category of book recommendations is under the topic of ethics, which I really like. Some more of my just top favorite books here.
Hmm.
One that we've both read, Never Let Me Go.
We read that in my AP Lit
Oh,
class.
interesting.
Yeah, I remember it being one of the like the coming of age type genre and my teacher telling us about it, but yeah, that was one of the books that I read.
I somehow went to the library and found this book and just picked it up randomly on my own without
What?
any prior
Wow.
knowledge or just reading, like, the back of the book or whatever and being like, "Hmm, that sounds cool." I don't know how
Mhm.
that happened because it's kind of more of an adult novel. I mean, it's not exactly YA.
Yeah, it's not YA. I mean, it's like new adult.
Before, like, new adult even existed as a
Yeah,
category, I guess.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's like a book for each age.
So, Never Let Me Go, I would say it has kind of a melancholy, nostalgic
Mhm.
vibe to it. It's a sad book, but it kind of asks questions about, like, what is the meaning of life? What is life?
This group of these 3 friends, they go to a boarding school so they don't see their families, and then halfway through the book, there's that huge spoiler. Like you said, when I think of that book, I just think of that certain vibe, and it kinda starts up here and you're like, "Oh, we're kids going to a boarding school," and then it just goes down and down and down. And Kasho Ishiguro is the author. Most of his books ask a lot of these questions about society and what it means to be a human. So, if you're
Yeah,
interested in that sort of, storytelling or thought, then you would definitely like his work.
and the movie's great too. A lot of these
I
have
have
really good
never seen the
movies.
movie.
What? Keira
I
Knightley's
know
in
Andrew
it.
Garfield's in it.
Andrew
I know.
Garfield's in it.
I know.
So I had Unwind next. It has some similar themes to Never Let Me Go. I read this right before The Hunger Games, which is interesting. Maybe I wouldn't have picked up The Hunger Games if I hadn't read Unwind first. Who
Mhm.
knows? Whole life would be different. Um, but there's basically this war over abortion.
Mhm.
And the result or like the compromise of that is that abortion is illegal, but when your child is, I believe, teenage age, then you can have them unwound, which means that they will be taken apart and their body parts will be used for donation. Neil Schusterman tends to have kind of outlandish ideas, things that I don't think would actually ever happen, but once you get past, like, that kind of initial big concept, then he just looks at the world and has all this world building from so many different angles and perspectives of, like, what this would mean and what the world would be. I really like how he does that.
See, I remember this book being or the series being so popular, like, back in
It
school,
was.
you could not get your hands on a copy of this at the library
I feel like it
because
was kind
everyone
of
had
right
it.
before The Hunger Games
Mhm.
kind of really boomed, that
Yeah.
it was like it was Unwind right before, and then everybody forgot about Unwind.
Yes. Yeah, but that leads us into because I haven't read this one, but that leads us into a book that you recommended for me that I actually read the trilogy this year,
I
also
did.
by Neil Shusterman, Scythe. If I could recommend a second book on this, it would be Scythe because Emily pushed me to read this for so long. I would argue that it's a little bit more dark for me than The Hunger Games would be. I feel like if I was 12 and I had The Hunger Games in front of me or I had Scythe in front of me, I think it would be easier for me to read The Hunger Games. Not that they're different, like their topics are easy in any sort of way, like one's easier, but Scythe is a very, very just like the events that happen in it are very dark to me. And
And he's not as simplistic of a writer
yeah.
as well, so I feel
Mhm.
like that adds another layer of, like, the violence, like, the darkness being a little bit more intense.
Yeah.
So it's
Mhm.
basically set in a utopian future where we have figured out how to not die. The result of that is that we're on this planet Earth and there's overpopulation. So, in order to control that, there are these people who are appointed as scythes, and their job is to go around killing people, basically. And there are two main characters who are reluctantly chosen by a scythe to be scythe apprentices and potentially become future scythes and the journey that they go on.
And it's a journey that, like, for me, I was texting Emily because I listened to the audiobook. I recommend the audiobook. Emily
It's so
recommended it to
good.
me. Twists that I did not see coming. I don't know if you saw all of them coming, but I feel like there's so many events that happen that you don't know where it's gonna leave off at.
And
Whereas
and
with
that's
the
what
Hunger
reminds me
Games,
of The Hunger Games too, a little bit, because
yeah,
it's not exactly the same, but how Suzanne would have those chapter endings that you're just like, "What?" And I
like
feel like
what?
I
Left
had
what?
similar moments in Scythe where there are twists, and I was just like, "What?" And I just hadn't really
Yeah.
felt that since The Hunger Games. It came out in 2016. I don't think I read it till 2018. I don't know why I waited so long. But it's not The Hunger Games. Like, I'm so hesitant in saying that something is as good as The Hunger Games or that has all of the pieces that The Hunger Games has, and I don't think Scythe does, but it's very similar to The Hunger Games in that just makes me think about, like, life and death, and there's, like, political elements to it. There's a really good villain.
Yeah. So I'm not a fan personally of the second and third book, especially the third book.
Not the
The third book
second
is my
book.
my lowest
Second
rated
book
book of
is
this
better
year.
than the first book.
No, but the first book, I love the first book. So if you're interested again in these almost concepts of what our world could be, I haven't read many utopian books.
The world is very fleshed out.
Yeah. So I'm surprised that this book doesn't get more attention too. I feel like it would
Right?
definitely make a good series or something. I'm kind of confused as to why no one has their hands on it for
Like
rights.
an adaptation.
Yeah.
See, I feel like it might be kind of silly as an adaptation. I feel like it's a little bit too high concept
Yeah.
to be just a not cheesy adaptation. 'Cause, like, kids
Yeah.
really going around, like, I don't know, killing people, like
Controlling.
wearing these robes. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know. It just you can picture it, but then I feel like in reality, it's a little outlandish.
Yeah. But yes, definitely read Scythe. Emily convinced me. I want to convince somebody listening to this. Um,
Everybody's gotta pass it on, you know?
exactly.
Convince
It's
one
like,
more person, and that's how we take over.
yes. And then the last book in our ethics sector, this is an adult book. Let me preface this by saying this is for people over the age of 18 because this book deals with a lot of inappropriate matters. But the next book is Tender as the Flesh. I believe it's a Brazilian book, but it's been translated into English. It is a society in which a virus has essentially killed off all the cattle and all animal meat. And so instead, people have resorted to cannibalism, but the cannibalism,
Ooh,
you raise humans in these environments that you'd be raising animals in order to eat them. So it's definitely like it's a short book. It was about 200 pages. Um, and it follows this main character who actually works at one of these like cattle, like human ranches, I don't know, or plants, human plants. It just questions a lot, like Never Let Me Go. What is humanity? And at what point do we, as humans, treat other human beings as equals? And so it's just a really interesting book. It's definitely for Hunger Games fans who are old enough, one, and two, able to deal with the subject matter because it is pretty descriptive. But it's an interesting book because it does deal with these the idea of like human ethics and what it is to be a human. So
yeah, I feel like I should have prefaced, like, The Road, rated R.
yeah, some of these were yeah,
It's
some of
not
these
for children.
we'll leave a comment in the description of the podcast of the different books that are like a R rating or
Good
above.
idea, Holly.
So yes, so children don't be reading these, but I mean it's still a good book. So check it out if you're old enough. And then that kind of sums it up for our ethics theme. But the next one, we have one book under fantasy, which is a book that you've read.
I feel like it didn't really fit under survival, although without this kind of fantasy element, I probably would have put it under survival. So if you've ever seen Under the Dome, it's like Under the Dome, but for kids.
Okay.
All of the adults disappear one day in a town, and all of the kids are still there, but they're trapped under this dome. So it's kind of like Lord of the Flies, except there are kind of some, I would say, almost like Stranger Things vibes to
Ooh,
it. A ton of the kids are like 11, so they have different interesting powers, and then like how that kind of the powers play into a societal structure.
interesting.
So yeah, it's kind of like Lord of the Flies, but some kids with superpowers.
I'll have to check that one out. I've seen that cover everywhere. Like I know I've seen that cover everywhere, but
It's by Michael Grant. I mean, it's kind of like an OG series, I think. It came out 2008. So same year as the Hunger Games. So I feel like anything that came out like right around the Hunger Games, like 2008, 2007, like Unwind, they were
mhm,
really popular for a short amount of time, not long
yeah.
enough because suddenly the Hunger Games like came out and became really popular and they became overshadowed.
Some of these books that Emily's recommending, I'm like, these are going on my TBR. So, okay, well, that's our fantasy section. And then moving on, we have classic dystopia. The first book on there is 1984, which I mean was published all the way back in 1949. This book and Fahrenheit 451 were books that I chose for my independent readings for AP Lit. So it's been a second since I've read them, but it's a dystopian novella and it follows this guy who is a part of this specific party. In this society, they have a thing called Big Brother, and Big Brother is always watching you. Big Brother is the greater power, and it talks a lot about surveillance. And so it relates to the Hunger Games because in the games, in the arena, you're constantly surveilled and your freedom is often taken away because you're constantly on camera. So, I mean, that's all I can remember from back when I read it, but Big Brother controls every aspect of people's lives. So, hence where we get the reality TV show Big Brother. um, but yeah, I definitely recommend this book in Fahrenheit 451. I feel like they're kind of books that you have to read once in your lifetime.
The
But
way I haven't read
Emily,
either book, but
but I haven't
I
read a lot
know
of your
I would
books.
have read 1984 by this point. I never had to read either of them for school, but
Mhm.
I would have read 1984 except for the fact that somebody like spoiled the entire plot for me.
Yeah.
So I know what happens. I don't know, might not ever get around to
And
it.
I feel like it's more important just to understand the reference to Big Brother, which I feel like everyone
Right.
does understand anyway.
Although I've
So,
never seen Big Brother, so
you know what? I watched it just before we filmed this. So yes, read Big Brother if you are still in school and you get a free choice. I definitely recommend it. And then the next book that is under this classic dystopia, both Emily and I have read. It is The Handmaid's Tale by Queen Margaret Atwood, the Canadian author. This is another one that we have to preface as being, I think it's new adult, but you have to be mature enough to understand and like follow the themes and
Mhm.
ideas behind it because there are trigger warnings. So make sure that you're aware of those.
Which I read this book in high school, I
Me
think as a
too.
sophomore.
Yeah, we read
It's,
it
like,
in
a little bit
class.
young. I mean, I know I could handle, like, the themes at that
Hmm.
point. So I read it before The Hunger Games, I think.
Oh, geez.
Interesting.
Did you read it
But
for school? Because we read it for a class.
we
But
read it for class, yeah.
okay. Even the show, like I read the book, I enjoyed the book. I can't watch the show. As a 22-year-old woman, I still cannot watch the show because it's very difficult.
It's basically a dystopic future of the United States of America. The government is overthrown by kind of a religious order, and it's a very patriarchal society.
Mhm.
Women get the short end of the stick.
Yeah. It's a dark book. I feel like a lot of people are probably aware of it, like 1984, Fahrenheit 451. It's very common. I feel like people are talking a lot about it with social things going on in the United States right now. So, I mean, I definitely recommend the book if it's something that you feel open to reading, but it is a very heavy book. So, definitely for readers who are ready to read it. Another book that we have is Fahrenheit 451. Fahrenheit 451 tells the story of another male character and his transformation from a book burning fireman into a book reading rebel. So it's basically about the society that controls what you read and what media you see. So, I mean, also very important today. Another short read and another book that has a lot of references. in today's society.
Well, Brave New World, I feel like is a classic that everyone should read. I
Hmm.
read it for school. I've read it a couple of times, but it is a futuristic world, a utopia, a lot of sci-fi elements, basically about this society where everyone is supposedly happy. They all take this drug called soma to keep them happy, to keep them at the appropriate level of behavior. And then there's this group outside of the society that are kind of the savages, and some characters visit the kind of savage territory, and one of them comes back to the society and things ensue. Like,
Mm.
I don't know.
Yeah. See, this
um
is one that I don't know much about for some reason. Like it's a classic that I know, like what you've told me is the most that I've ever heard about it.
It's a critique on society and excess and capitalism. Yeah, I love the world building of it too. I mean, I'm a huge sci-fi person, so I love Star Trek. I love seeing the different possible like futuristic elements to a society in addition to like the critique of humanity. I just love science fiction. So I think that's kind of also why it's one of my favorite classics.
It's definitely one that I need to read. That's one that's at the top of my list personally.
And I really loved the Peacock adaptation. A lot of people didn't, but I think I just love sci-fi so much that I love seeing a show
Hmm.
that even if it's, like, a little bit different from the book, like, I think they made some really cool changes that were needed, and the acting is fantastic. So, I would recommend watching the Brave New World series. That's just me.
Sweet. That sums it up for our classic dystopia. Kind of our last grouping is books that we would both recommend for kids before reading The Hunger Games, because we have to remember The Hunger Games is a very heavy book, and I don't think that third graders should just be jumping into reading it. So,
These are books that I read before I read The Hunger Games as well, so I feel like
yeah.
they kind of, like, prepared the way for me to really love The Hunger Games, and, like, I
Hmm.
think about, like, well, I might have a kid someday, and, as much as I want them to read The Hunger Games eventually, I'm not gonna just throw that in their lap, like,
Yeah. Here you go.
they gotta, slowly start with something else.
Hmm.
So, these are books that I've read and, like, I just love, and I think they're great as gateways to The Hunger
Yes.
Games. First one I have on the list is Uglies, which came out in 2005. So I guess I read this in elementary s all these I read in elementary school. Back in 2005, there's something about Twilight, like, I feel like we owe a lot to Twilight, okay?
Uh-huh.
Because Uglies is like it feels like an upper middle grade book, but, like, it's kind of what YA was. YA wasn't as great as it is
Yeah.
now. Back then, it
Hmm.
was more kind of just, like, advanced middle grade, but I feel like Uglies was kind of edgy for the time, like, for
Okay.
2005, but it's basically a future dystopian or utopian, whichever, depending on how you look at
Yeah.
it, society, and when people get to a certain age, then they are an ugly, but then they become a pretty. So they get some kind of cosmetic surgery, and then they become pretty and can move to the pretty place. I read this a long time ago, so I'm probably butchering this. Um, but obviously, the main character kind of starts to find out some things that maybe the society she lives in is a little bit darker than it appears.
I'm gonna bring it up. This is the other one that was at the school library and everyone had it and everyone was reading it and
So
you could never get
popular.
your hands on, but I never ended up reading it. I just always heard my friends talking about it. So I feel like if I do want to go back and read some of these like older, newer YA books, this would be at the top of my list because it's really popular.
And then I guess so we've both read The City of Ember?
Yes, it's been forever.
For me too.
It like been so long. And I mean, I completely forgot about this book and I think it was a few months ago. Somebody brought it up.
It was
I
probably
don't know
me.
who.
I'm like a
It's
huge
probably
City of
you.
Ember girl. That
And
was
I
one of
was
my
like,
my
"Wait a
first
minute."
obsessions.
Yeah, I remember loving it. There's a movie, right? Like, I remember
There
seeing
is a
the
movie.
movie and
Yeah,
loving
and
the
I was
movie.
like, remember how you told that story about how you were so insistent about going to see The Hunger Games when it came out,
Stop.
and not
Yes.
wasn't your family like on vacation or something?
Mhm.
I was so insistent that we saw City of Ember the day it came out. I was like, "Are you
Aw.
kidding me? Like, I have to go today. Like, my life is over if I don't see this movie today." And, it was
Yeah.
amazing. I love
Mhm.
City of Ember. It's such a cool movie, book also, but I've watched the movie so many times. Like, that's more what I remember, and I think they did a really good job, and, like, the aesthetic, like, the underground world, it's so cool. I love the aesthetic of City of Ember. It's just a very unique story that these people, they're underground. Their city is failing though, like their generator is dying, and they don't really know that they're underground. They just know that the world outside of their city is darkness. So the main character has to figure out that they're underground and lead the people out. It's just a really great
Mhm.
dystopian story with a great female heroine, and the movie is amazing. It's beautiful, the aesthetic. Saoirse Ronan stars in it. Like,
Yes.
that was the
Yes.
day I fell in love with Saoirse Ronan. Like,
I totally
from
forgot
that
she was in
point,
that.
my chair in the theater, I was like, "You are my favorite actress."
You're, like, bowing
So,
down.
yeah, I love her.
I totally forgot that she was in that movie, but I do like I can't remember what it's about, um, except for you telling me this, but I just have pieces of the movie because I rewatched it so many times that are kinda it's like one of those forgotten childhood memories that, like, pop back out, and you're like, "Oh, yeah, that was a
There's
thing."
this really weird scene with a giant mole rat
Yes!
thing that was not in the book at all. That was a big
Yeah.
uproar that they put that in there just for drama, but, it's fine. It's
Yes.
fine.
No, it's such a good book, and I think I still kept it because when I was cleaning my shelves off, I remember it was you that brought it up, yeah, and I was like, "I need to keep this book." Like, I have to hold on to some of my favorite, like, books I read when I was younger. So, it's good and it's light enough that even though it deals with, like, problems, it's a good introduction for children to read about, like, conflict and
Yeah, I mean,
dystopia.
it's a story of, like, there's a main girl and she's figuring out this puzzle, this mystery. It's more like
Mhm.
a dystopia mystery.
And then our final book that we would recommend for kids, which when I saw that you put this on here, I remember reading it back when I was in 3rd grade in my upper reading level group. Like we had like reading groups, you remember? It's
Yeah,
Hatchet by Gary Paulsen.
which
Yes.
he recently passed away, I think.
What? Emily?
Yeah.
I'm
Sorry.
ruining my night. Wait, what?
Rip. Yeah.
Okay. Rest in peace. That threw me off. But yes, Hatchet. Hatchet also fits under the survival grouping, but
It
again,
does, but because it is kind of more of a,
a
like,
younger read.
yeah, I thought it kind of belonged in this list.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It follows Brian, who is a passenger on a small aircraft, and it crashes in, I think it's a Canadian wilderness, some wilderness,
Mhm.
and follows him trying to survive on his own until help comes for him. It was intense. I remember reading it in my group and being like, maybe this is where
Yeah.
my fear of planes crashing stems from.
I remember there being something about I actually just got the audiobook and, like, I'm just on the first chapter, but I'm
Mhm.
listening to it again, but I just remember there being something about, like, eating turtle eggs or something and,
Yeah.
like, having to save them or, like, ration food and just,
Mhm.
like, the mental struggle of surviving. I just remember it being really good. I don't think I appreciated it as much when I read it the first time as
Yeah.
a young child. Like, I'm excited to read it and it's a short book too, but
Mhm.
finish reading it as an adult and see if anything else stands out to me.
As a 9-year-old, I don't know if I fully understood it too, so I'll have to go back. That about sums up our groupings of books that
Our
are
recommendations.
yes, similar to The Hunger Games. But we also have a list, like almost like an honorable mentions list
If
of
you can
books
say
that
honorable.
that are kind of recommended for the Hunger Games. It's like if you look up on Google, like books similar to the Hunger Games, I call them the wannabes because a lot of them kind of suck, to be honest
And
with
a lot of
you.
them came out in 2010,
Yeah.
2011, 2012, 2013. So,
I
yeah.
just remember being so disappointed. Like you said about Scythe, I've been looking for a book like Hunger Games to like make me feel that again because
Make
I've
me
only ever
feel
felt it.
something.
Like make me feel the Hunger Games, please. What it would feel like to read the books for the first time. And this list, I mean, there's two favorites that I have, but the rest I'm kind of like I remember reading them and being like another one. Like even at the age of like 12 or 13, I was like, are we joking now? Like, why are we still doing this? So, no offense to these books, but they're on this list for a reason.
The first one I have is Legend, which, to be fair, I kind of liked when I read, but it hasn't stood the test of time for me.
Yes.
Like it doesn't stand out as something phenomenal. I know it does have a pretty good fan base, and there's a strong female character. I think I remember her seeming a little bit too strong, like too good almost.
Mm,
Um, like in that way that Katniss is like relatable, but like June wasn't so much. I can't for the life of me tell you what the plot was.
stop.
But yeah, maybe check it out.
Yeah, check it out. We'll see. We'll see.
It's
Um,
it's like overthrowing the government.
classic dystopia.
Sprinkle of that.
Gives me definitely Hunger Games vibes. All of these are like attempts at like a just like a completely awful government. So
I think she works for the government. She's like a prodigy. Prodigy is like one of the names of the book, so that's probably on the right track.
there we go.
And she is maybe like an assassin or she's like highly trained. And then there's like this boy who like she has to go after or something, but then they end up, like becoming friends or something. So
Interesting. Interesting.
the
Interesting.
people who like this book are probably like Emily.
We should also note the dates because, like you said, that's important. That one came out in 2011. And
2011.
then
Yeah.
the next one that we're going to talk about is Matched, which we both read, came out in 2010.
I remember more of that one.
I remember this one because of the cover. I remember girls my age, like at the Scholastic Book Fair, were running around with this book because they're like, look how pretty she is on the cover. Like she was wearing the
All
beautiful
about
green
that
dress.
cover.
Yes. And the inside was awful. I remember picking it up and being so excited and being like, what is this garbage?
Here's what I remember about this book. This girl gets matched with this guy who
Hmm.
seems great, who I remember really liking. I
Yeah.
was like, great, this is perfect. They picked
Yes.
someone perfect for you. Like, great. Like, I want to be matched. Like, this
Yeah.
sounds awesome. And then
Uh-huh.
she runs off for this guy who, like, wrote her a poem or something. That's all I remember.
Yeah. I can't remember reading the rest of the series trilogy either. Or duology. I don't know what it is.
I don't think I finished it. I might have read the second one. It's a trend for me. The next one I have on the list is Wither,
I've never heard of
which
this one.
I think this book was kind of creepy, is what I
Oh,
remember. It had Handmaid's Tale vibes,
okay.
or it might have had a very similar plot that this girl ends up being married off to this older guy who like has multiple wives, I guess, like younger wives. And I think they have to escape. It's like
Oh,
Handmaid's Tale and the fact that like they get pregnant and like have kids for this dude. I don't know. I can't remember if there was something about
ew.
infertility. It was like Handmaid's Tale, but YA, which
Ew.
is kind of
Not
strange.
appropriate. Yeah. Okay.
Let me wait, it's this book. Why do I have a copy of this?
Yeah, I've never seen
I don't
that book
know.
in my
It's
life.
called Wither. It has a very pretty cover.
Yeah. Read the back or the cover.
Thanks to modern science, this is just all going to be new to me. I don't even remember. Every newborn has become a ticking genetic time bomb. Males only live to age 25, and females only live to age 20. In this bleak landscape, young girls are kidnapped and forced into polygamous marriages to keep
Oh
the
my god.
population from dying out.
What?
There you go. So I guess he wasn't a way older guy.
But he's old. I
But
mean, if
like
you're
when I
reading
read
that as
it,
a
I was
kid.
like, ew. But
Yeah.
yes, yeah, it's like, 12-year-old, 25-year-old guy who's about to die and is really sick. So
Ew. That's kind of
Wither,
messed up.
that's fun.
That's kind of messed up. Delirium. I never read Delirium. You read Delirium, a 2011 book. So you're seeing a trend with the dates here.
I think Delirium is pretty much about teenagers. Something happens to them to repress them falling in love because love
Oh.
is a disease,
Hmm.
essentially, is what's believed in this future. So I think might be a love triangle. Not super sure. I definitely read this book, and I remember it being slightly better than the others. Like, I will say that. Like, I think
Okay.
Delirium and Legend are kind of like the better ones on this list, but I don't remember too much about it. I know it was going to be a TV show with
Hmm.
Emma Roberts, I think. And
Whoa.
then you can find like clips from the pilot
Really?
online. Yeah.
Interesting.
It seemed terrible, so I'm really glad they didn't make it. But that'll still kind of give you a taste a little bit of the plot.
Okay, now that I know, I'm gonna go find those. Yeah, I did not read that one. One that I did read though was The Maze Runner from 2009, which I'm
Did
surprised
did
you.
you read the whole series?
Yeah, I did. I did.
Okay, I just read the first book.
Okay. I had a really, really hard time with it. Like I got the box set because I wanted it so bad because everyone was obsessed with it and the movie was coming out with Dylan O'Brien, blah blah blah. And I just remember it being just dragged on so much. And I can't really tell you anything that happened outside of the first book. Yeah, but it's definitely like I enjoyed it, but I don't know. I think I tried to be into it more than I actually was into it.
I really enjoyed the movie.
Yeah, the movie is good. It follows
What's like, yeah, I was like, what's a description of the Maze Runner?
a group of boys find themselves in this maze. They wake up with no recollection of anything except maybe their names. I don't even know if they know their names. And then they find one girl also in the maze, and they have to figure out why they're there and get out of the maze, I believe. It's been a minute. It's been a hot second,
Yeah,
but
which
I
I
think
feel like
that's
the first book was a decent story,
it. Mm-hmm.
but I think it's just another one of those books where the author didn't fully know where the story was going,
Mm-hmm.
which compared to the Hunger Games, I feel like that's just one of the things that Suzanne, like, that's why the books are superior, because she knew exactly what she was doing and had a plan for the plot, where it was going to
Mm-hmm.
go and where she wanted to end and what she wanted to say.
So another book that we both read was Divergent, which is an amazing first book, amazing, amazing standalone. We did not need much else. And that came out in 2011, but a book similar to it, I remember I didn't read the testing, but I remember I picked it up and I might have tried reading it. Those two books deal more with personality differences and like a utopia where everyone knows their place sort of thing. So Emily has it. Emily has
Not
not
me
read it.
having more books that I haven't read and don't
Oh, don't
care
even
to
get me
read. See,
started.
I got this one at Goodwill too. Like, I
There
was
you
just like,
go.
oh, it's a dystopia. I gotta get it for the shelf. Am I gonna
Uh-huh.
read it? Probably not.
But it's very similar to Divergent. I remember, well, in terms of what the plot is.
Hmm.
So, but Divergent was great. We love Divergent here. We love Divergent.
I really liked Divergent. I don't know, love is a strong word
I loved
for
the
me
first
for
book. I loved
Divergent,
it.
but I really enjoyed reading Divergent.
I like the first book, and I think it's an interesting choice that she makes at the end with her characters. But
I still
I
have
read
not
it.
read. I read Insurgent and then I stopped.
Maybe good. But obviously, Divergent and The Maze Runner are probably the most well known of these. As you can see, there are a lot of books that if you're interested in reading something similar to the Hunger Games, you can find a little piece of everything from the Hunger Games in a
Yeah.
different book.
I feel like that's a good way to put it. I've yet to find something that I love just as much for a lot of the similar reasons, like all encompassing, but I don't feel like that's ever gonna happen.
Yeah.
So the Hunger Games is at the top for a reason.
So if you could walk away, final question, walk away telling listeners or watchers one book or series from the list, what would it be?
Classic book, I would say Lord of the Flies. I feel
Mhm.
like that I mean, it's one of Suzanne's favorites, and I feel like it's heavily influenced. I feel like you see it in the Hunger Games trilogy, and it makes me think a lot about Ballad. I just love Lord of the Flies. And then Scythe would be my my
Absolutely.
second pick. I think it's the thing that has made me feel feelings while reading the most since I read The Hunger Games. So, I'd
Mhm.
recommend that.
Mine would be 1984 would be my classic.
Okay.
And then my obviously my other one would be Grace Year. Read the Grace Year. No one loves the Grace
Okay,
Year.
okay,
I
I'm
think
gonna do it. I'm gonna get the
yes.
audiobook and listen to it.
Yes. So all of these choices are great options, obviously, and I'm sure there is another list of books that we've completely missed out. So if you're listening, comment and share with us some of your favorite picks from our list or from your own list that we completely did not include in this.
And I'm
Because
so sorry if I trashed one of your favorite
oh my
books.
gosh, I'm not
And
sorry.
you
Readers
can
are allowed to
call
have
me out.
opinions.
You'd be like,
um,
"Emily, you need to reread Wither. It's so good."
Stop. All the 2010s, like same book, same story, same character, whatever. It's fine. Thank you all for joining us. This is a fun episode, something that we haven't done before. As we close out, join us for Tribute Talk tomorrow night, every Monday night. It's a party with our friends. You're our friends. Come hang out. And yeah, until next time, we'll see you in a couple weeks.
See ya.
Bye.